Warning, this podcast contains descriptions of murder, torture and abuse. As a result, it may not be suitable for everybody. Cardiff, Wales, the capital, UK's 11th largest city with 18 million tourists every year. The 10th most visited city by international tourists in the UK. Home to Cardiff City Football Club. Principality boasts the second largest stadium in the world with a fully retractable roof. And listen to how this beaut of a city saw the death of Karen Price, a 15-year-old schoolgirl living in a residential children's home in Cardiff, and Lynette White, a 20-year-old sex worker that saw innocent men convicted for her murder, and Malcolm Green, who dismembered body parts and left them in carrier bags across Wales and England.
Of the latest mass shooting in America.
This is humanity, if we can call it that, at its worst.
650 murders last year.
Wife, mother, serial killer.
So far, they've unearthed 3 sets of remains.
From the creators of A Brief History podcast, a Need Media production, comes a new weekly true crime podcast. Hometown Murders dives deep into the murky underbelly of your hometown. Subscribe now to Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to your podcast. On the 7th of December 1989, building work started at the 29 Fitzhammond Embankment, Cardiff. They were evacuating a back garden where they unearthed a roll of carpet. The carpet, around 6 feet in length, was bound with electrical cord and, although rotten in places, was well preserved. Upon unrolling the carpet, human bones were discovered and police were called immediately. The decaying bones of a skeleton and a black bag which looked like contained a head was unearthed when the police arrived. Initially, police had no idea who it was or why the skeleton remains were buried. This proved to be difficult for the police to identify who it was. Groundbreaking technology was employed with a few strokes of luck, and answers were finally revealed. Police called in a pathologist who confirmed that the bones were that of a human and were found close to the rear door of a basement flat. Police then looked to identify previous tenants. This was an easy task. Fitzhammond Embankment was also known as a bedsit, called bedsit land, with the building altered to become multi-residency. As a result, the community was transient and consisted mainly of pimps, sex workers, drug users and dealers. In the end, 80 police officers were seconded to investigate, and with judge eventually remarking that it was an extraordinary undertaking. The pathologist was able to confirm it wasn't a recent burial, as the bones were clean of flesh. No trauma was present to the site either. No flesh on the bones, but there were some strands of fair hair. Police were able to confirm the remains were that of a female, white, aged between 15 and 20 years of age. Using teeth and the jaw, dentists were able to confirm that the female was 15 and a half years of age. They also discovered blood deposits that had been forced into a tooth cavity, which indicated a violent death. Using entomology, the presence of blowfly pupae indicated that the body hadn't been buried immediately after death. The girl's body had been kept in an exposed location after death and buried a few days later. Police were able to discover that the victim had met a violent death some years previous. Police also discovers remains of a pair of jeans as well as a bra. The remains also consisted of a button and a zip, and they were able to confirm that the clothes were cheap, so the girl came from a poorer background. When the bra was examined, it found the label had the name Miss Knickers on it, so the police used this to find the company that sold it. A small company that had operated in England in the early 80s was found, and they were able to speak to the owner. The owner confirmed that the labels were put on the bras between 1979 and 83. This gave the police an approximate time frame to work from. Alongside other evidence, police were able to confirm that no item of clothing was manufactured before January 81. Piecing this together, the approximate time of death given by the entomologist was able to ascertain that the girl died between 1981 and 1984. Police then decided to concentrate their efforts on finding out who the previous tenants of the basement flat at 29 Fitzhammond Embankment began with a simple door-to-door inquiry. This led to an incredible piece of luck when they knocked on the door of one resident. The resident had acted as a caretaker for some of the properties, and she not only had used rent books, she kept them all. These books contained names and dates of each tenant, and the police were able to quickly establish vital information. The carpet in which the body had been wrapped had been photographed in order to show former residents in the hope it would be recognised. One male tenant who occupied the flat between 1981 February to June 82 didn't recognise it. However, police looking into his background have previous convictions made him a person of interest. Knowing approximate timeframes, police began the arduous task of sifting through boxes of invoices, and after 3 days of non-stop searching they found it. The carpet had been fitted on the 16th of September 1980. The carpet fitter details were included, and they called him next. The carpet fitter was unable to help with the police any further. 5 weeks after the initial discovery, police had exhausted all forensic lines of inquiry, and there was no nearer to identifying the girl, and they employed the services of Richard Neve at the University of Manchester, who was using pioneering new techniques in facial reconstruction. Neve set about taking a cast of the scar and rebuilding the face. The procedure took around 3 weeks, but as there was pressure from the South Wales Police, he was given 5 days to complete the task, and on 7th of January 1990, not knowing whether it would yield any results, the police published the reconstruction in the press. Just 2 days after the reconstruction was published, 2 former social workers contacted the police. They lived in different areas of the country, one in Yorkshire, England, and the other still lived in Cardiff, Wales. Yet both gave the same name. They believed that to be that of the body of Karen Price. Police traced Karen's parents, who confirmed that neither had seen her for a decade, but the reconstruction did indeed look like their daughter, and upon seeing the photographs, police were astounded at the likeness of the reconstruction. Police began to build up a picture of Karen's life and was keen to establish how a young girl could simply disappear and not be missed. Karen was neglected as a young child. At the age of 10, she was placed into care. On many occasions, Karen had disappeared from a council assessment centre in Pontypridd, mid Glamorgan in 1981. Police discovered that a missing persons form was in existence, but they weren't allowed to recover it. They did learn that Karen had been living just a quarter of a mile away from Fitzhamon embankment. She often visited the central square area of Cardiff and befriended some of the local characters. The central square area was frequented by undesirables and the vulnerable. Karen was one of them. Karen was last seen on the 2nd of July 81. On the 15th of February 1990, police published a photograph in the press and appealed for any information. A number of witnesses came forward and confirmed that Karen was a visitor to the basement flat at 29 Fitzhamon embankment, at the time owned by a man named Alan Charlton. Police arrested Charlton at a pub in Tiger Bay as he was working as a bouncer. He was 30 years old and from Bridgewater, Somerset. Friends described him as vindictive. He was known to prey upon weaker members of society and the vulnerable, especially some residents whom he liked to exploit. He was also known to prey upon people in Central Square, Karen being one of them. A man named Idris Ali came forward as a witness. When he gave evidence to the police, he told them he had acted as a pimp in Central Square and he was tasked with obtaining girls for Charlton for parties at his flat. He described Charlton as a pimp also. He then went on to describe how he went on a state that he was there when Karen was killed. 2 months after she disappeared from the children's home, Charlton had wanted to take lewd photographs of Karen, but that Karen flatly refused. Charlton flew into a rage and raped and strangled Karen before asking Ali to wrap her body in the carpet, which he did. Charlton then buried her body. Ali was arrested immediately. Ali and Charlton were found guilty of the murder of Karen. Charlton was jailed for life and Ali, who was 16 at the time of the murder, was detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. In 1994, both Charlton and Ali appealed against their convictions. Charlton's appeal was dismissed, but Ali's conviction was reduced from murder to manslaughter. Ali knew that if he then pleaded guilty, he'd be immediately released, so on the 21st of December 1994, he did just that. However, Ali found himself back in soon after on 2 offences of wounded and returned to Cardiff prison, where he was an inmate on the 30th of November 1996 when a serious riot broke out. Ali was accused of inciting a riot and in 1997 found guilty of taking part and causing grievous bodily harm with intent and sentenced to a further 12 years in prison. In 2014, the Criminal Case Review Commission, which investigated potential miscarriages of justice, confirmed that both Charlton and Ali's cases would be referred to the appeal court in London. Both cases were heard following concerns about the conduct of some officers in the South Wales Police Force in the late 80s and early 90s. Judges rejected all on the basis that Ali had, quote, unequivocally, end quote, admitted Karen's manslaughter, and doubts about the reliability of evidence against Charlton been brought to the attention of the judge by the judge trial. The conviction was upheld. Lynette White was murdered on the 14th of February 1988 in Cardiff, Wales. At the time, South Wales Police issued a photo fit image of a blood-stained white male seen in the vicinity at the time of the murder, but they were unable to trace the man. In November 1988, the police charged 5 black and mixed-race men with White's murder, although none of the scientific evidence discovered at the crime scene could be linked to them. In November 1990, following what was then the largest and longest murder trial in British history, 3 of the men were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The convictions were ruled unsafe in 1992 and quashed by the Court of Appeal after it was decided the police investigating the murder had acted improperly. The wrongful conviction of the 3 men had been called one of the most egregious miscarriages of justice in recent times. The police insisted the men had been released purely on a legal technicality. They would be seeking no other suspects. In January 2002, new DNA technology enabled forensic scientists to assign a reliable crime scene DNA profile. The extracted profile led police to the real killer, Jeffrey Gafford, who confessed to White's murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Controversially, Gafford received a shorter minimum tariff than had been given to the wrongly convicted men. White had left school without any qualifications and been working as a sex worker since she was 14 years of age. Acquaintances said that she would be the first girl out at lunchtime and the last one left at night, even working at Christmas. Her friends described her as pretty and popular, and she earned up to £100 each night. White went missing 5 days before her murder and made no contact with her friends or family or any known associates. Her whereabouts during this period or the reason for her disappearance had never been ascertained. She was due to be called as a witness for the prosecution in 2 forthcoming trials and was later conjectured that she was deliberately, quote, lying low, end quote, to avoid giving evidence. The first trial involved the allegation of attempted murder and the second involved an allegation of attempting to procure the services of a 13-year-old girl for sex work. White disappeared, the police began actively searching for her and the judge issued a warrant for her arrest. The police, who had been looking for her all weekend, had discovered White laying on the back of her bedroom in the flat, having suffered multiple injuries. White's throat had been cut from the right ear across to the front and around to the left of the neck, exposing the bones of her spine. Multiple stab wounds to her chest and breast, and other wounds to her face, stomach, arms and wrists, inner thighs, as well as defensive wounds on her hands. The pathologist determined that she had died between midnight and 4 a.m. Her wristwatch had stopped at 1:45 a.m, leading to police to conclude that it was the most likely time of death. White's body was discovered between the foot of the bed, the room's only furniture, and the window. She was still clothed, but one shoe off. Heavy blood stain into the base of the carpet, bed, and the walls of the room. There was very little blood on the mattress, where an open but unused condom was found. Forensic examination found 157 different sets of finger and palm prints in the flat. Semen was present both in White's vagina and underwear, which had been determined by the pathologists had been deposited within 6 hours of her death. Some of the blood found on White's clothing, including her exposed sock, was found to be from a male with the blood type AB. As a result of the mistakes made during the investigation, a total of 19 serving or retired police officers, including one inspector, was arrested. 4 witnesses gave evidence at the original murder trial were charged with perjury, though some of the police officers would later go on to sue against false misrepresentation and damages to their reputation. Malcolm Green, dubbed the body in the bags killer, mutilated victims and left their body parts in bags scattered across Wales. Green had seen his younger brother decapitated by a train when he was just 12. A teacher driving along the A467 near Rogerstone Newport spotted two holders left randomly beside the road. Inside the holders were dismembered upper arms and legs and torso of a person, all individually wrapped in plastic and sealed with sellotape. 4 days later, on March 26, 1990, a young farmer some 50 miles away at St Bride's, Loon, found that looked like a football-shaped object wrapped in a red plastic bag. When he put his hand inside, he felt something that appeared to be a nose. It turned out to be the severed and bludgeoned head that had received a dozen blows and sustained multiple fractures. Nearby was a white plastic bag containing 2 amputated hands with a third finger left on the hand crushed. The police would set on the trial of one of Wales' most notorious killers, a double murderer who was one of only a handful of people in Wales ever to be ordered to serve life behind bars without a possibility of parole. He murdered 2 people 20 years apart and was better known after his trial as Body in a Bag's killer, Malcolm Green. Green's bloodlust is said to have stemmed from a childhood trauma. When he was just a child, he witnessed the horrific death of his younger brother, who was decapitated by a train as they played on the railway line at Ely, Cardiff. As an adult, Green found an outlet for his sick obsession working in a slaughterhouse. At 24, Green changed jobs, becoming a crane driver in the docks. It was not long after that he carried out the first 2 murders 20 years apart, which would make him one of Wales' most notorious killers. Green had married young and lived with his wife Marilyn Stevenson. He got in fits after he was married. He went in convulsions and we had to hold him down on the floor then he blacked out, said his mother. He'd been in lots of fights. He knew how to look after himself. A doctor at Cardiff jail said he'd covered in scars that if he pulled one stitch, he'd unravel. His first victim was Glenys Johnson, 40, from Grangetown. She was domestic cleaner and also believed to work as a sex worker. The trial at Cardiff Assizes in 1971 heard that Miss Johnson was brutally and viciously murdered on wasteland when Green slashed her throat, causing a 5-inch wound, and proceeded to cut other parts of her body. After committing a murder, he washed blood-stained clothing at the showers of the British Steel Corporation East Moors Works, where he was employed as a crane driver. He later telephoned the police investigating Miss Johnson's death on 2 occasions, telling the operator, "Have you found the body yet? There will be 4 more." When he was arrested, Green made a clear admission to the murder and gave a statement to the police. He said, quote, "I started walking home by myself. I had a lot to drink and wanted to sober up. At the bottom of Beaut Street, I was approached by this woman. She asked me if I was interested in business. She started screaming and pulling my clothes. I lost my temper and exploded. The next thing I remember was walking home." End quote. Green would later, in subsequent trials, claim that his statement was invented by police and he had no idea how Mrs. Johnson's blood had ended up on his shoes or how his blood came to be in her clothing. When the police visited Green's flat, they found a dummy wrapped in a roll of carpet with a shirt and coat over it and a knife stuck in its neck. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on November the 5th, 1971. But as he was led from the dock to serve 20 years behind bars, Green shouted, quote, "I'll appeal against this," end quote. It was only in 1989 that Green was released on licence from Leyhall Open Prison. He was then 44 and he moved to Bristol in a bid to start a new life. A few months after that, a gruesome discovery of body parts was made in Rogerstone in St Bride's, Wentloog. It did not take long for the police to link the two. After he was released, Green had stuck up a friendship with a 24-year-old man called Clive Tully, a New Zealander who had relatives in Newport area. Clive Tully's body parts had been found wrapped in plastic and sealed in sellotape in holdalls and plastic bags. Tully was on a world tour and found a new building job with a Bristol firm, and he moved into a house in Luxton Road, Bristol, with Green and his site foreman Michael Higgins. Tully briefly moved to Spain and Portugal before returning to Bristol on March the 11th with no money. When the last people to see Mr. Tully alive was said Mr. Tully stayed with him for 5 days in Bristol while looking for a job and later drove him to find a place to stay. On March the 17th, Tully visited Green's girlfriend's house in Oakdean Avenue and asked him if he could stay the night at Luxton Street flat he once shared with him. Green agreed to take a look around his house and return to his girlfriend's home. It was believed Tully was murdered in the sitting room of the property by Green on March 19th. Pathologists came to the conclusion that a hammer was used to deliver multiple blows to the head before using a sharp instrument or a saw to neatly cut off his head. The removal of lower arms, legs, hands and torso was also described as being neat, having caused little damage to the soft tissue. Green was arrested on March 30th, 1990, at the front door of his girlfriend Helen Barnes' house in Fishponds, Bristol. An investigator into Tully's murder found that Green's finger and thumbprints were on the bag which held Mrs. Tully's head, severed remains, and he found in Luxton Street contained a trail of blood leading up the stairs to a spotless bathroom. Green had broken down and saw a holdall beside a mini Metro which belonged to Green's girlfriend. He later picked him out of a police identity parade. Following a week-long trial, Green was found guilty of Tully's murder. He was once again jailed for life in order to serve at least 25 years before the Home Secretary Kenneth Baker felt the sentence was too lenient and changed the tariff to a whole life sentence, with telling Green he would die in prison. If you would like to support the Home Time Murders podcast, please go to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Home Time Murders, where you'll see several different tiers of support from just $1 a month through up to $25 that should give you producing credit, a t-shirt, a mug, exclusive content, ad-free and early episodes. Please look now and support in any way you can. Thank you for everybody who's listened to this episode. This episode has been researched, written and hosted by me, Andrew Knight. Sound, music and editing has been provided by Harry Edmondson. Make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere where you listen to your podcast. This allows the episode to be downloaded automatically as soon as it's released. Please reach out to us on the social media. We're at Hometown Murders on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Please support the show by leaving a 5-star rating or a review. It really does help